Being a raging nerd has led me into quite a few movie debates, many of them having to do with which film is the best within a franchise, and there's typically a general consensus that the first entry is oftentimes the best chapter of a saga, but I think this line of thought is a little outdated. So in today's video I'm going to discuss some sequels that I think surpass the original. And I have 3 tiers that I'll be going through, the first being clear-cut takes that I think most people would probably agree with. The second tier will be approaching hot take territory and will likely be a little divisive. And the last tier is purely scorching hot takes, where I'm fully expecting most people to disagree with me, but these are opinions that I will stand 10 toes down on. For the clear-cut tier, we have Spider-Man 2, Shrek 2, Empire Strikes Back, and The Dark Knight. And I believe all 4 of these films build upon the initial entry of their saga by adding interesting lore, furthering character development and progression, while also feeling like distinctly different films. And I think that last part is especially important when setting out to make a successful sequel to a great movie. And I do think the films preceding all of these sequels were great in their own right. All of the first chapters here were essentially origin stories, meaning that they introduced us to heroes and how they came to be. But all of these follow-ups do something even more interesting in my opinion, and that's forcing our heroes to question who they are and what they stand for. Spider-Man 2 does this by forcing our lead to question whether or not being Spider-Man is infringing upon his life as Peter Parker, and if a balance between the two is possible. Shrek 2 sees Shrek start to question whether or not he needs to change in order to be good enough for Fiona, and to win the acceptance of her royal family. The Empire Strikes Back confronts Luke with the fact that his father is one of the most evil individuals in the galaxy, and that the dark side is quite literally in his blood. And The Dark Knight sees Batman for the first time, confronted by a villain who he is unable to psychologically analyze and understand, as the Joker is just pure chaos, and is also hell-bent on forcing Batman to break his cardinal rule. In essence, all 4 of these movies progress our protagonist and the story in extremely compelling ways, and just have superior execution to their predecessors in my assessment. Okay, this is where things start to get a little spicy as we approach hot take territory. I think Godfather Part 2, Top Gun Maverick, Blade 2, and John Wick 2 are all the best films in their series. Godfather Part 1 and 2 are both classics. I don't think anyone who has seen both would deny that fact, but getting to see the parallel between a young Vito Corleone and Michael Corleone's current struggles is incredible, and I do think Robert De Niro is better as Vito than Marlon Brando was. In general, while both are great, I feel that Part 2 is more ambitious and entertaining than Part 1, and find myself wanting to revisit it more often. Now, the first Top Gun is a fun 80s action flick, but I do wholeheartedly believe that it is overrated. Tom Cruise has developed and grown as an actor, and we have far superior action as technology has just naturally evolved in the decades in between the 2 movies. Top Gun Maverick also really captures the heart of the original and feels in many ways like a love letter to the 80s cult classic. So given the better execution and effects, and the similar vibe both have, I think Maverick clearly soars above the initial Top Gun. Blade 2 is an interesting one, but I primarily think it is better directed and just looks better than the first film. While I love Blade, every time I watch his debut, the movie just becomes more and more dated, as the CGI looks rough. And I also like that this sequel forces Blade to team up with vampires this time around, as fighting these foes was what largely defined him in the first film. The initial John Wick outing is awesome, partially because of how simple the premise is. It's really just a revenge story, but with stellar action and an iconic Keanu Reeves performance. But the sequel really builds upon this and gives us even superior action in my opinion. And by building out the Continental and giving us a further look into John's past, John Wick 2 is just a more engaging film, and is also what really made me buy into John Wick as a film property, because while I enjoy the first movie, it was largely standalone and contained. Now things are about to get scorching. We finally made it to the hot take territory. And I think Psycho 2, Blade Runner 2049, Toy Story 2, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade all surpass the original. Starting with Psycho 2, I just think the story here is far more compelling this time around, as seeing a reformed Norman Bates slowly being dragged back down into mental insanity is fascinating to watch unfold. And Richard Franklin is just as good, if not better, behind the camera than Hitchcock was in the first film. I understand that Psycho was influential and is seen as a groundbreaking film, but as far as entertainment value and intrigue are concerned, Psycho 2 blows it out of the water for me. Blade Runner 2049, to put it bluntly, is better directed, has far superior cinematography, and is a more fascinating movie than Blade Runner. I know that a lot of people will disagree with that, but I have always thought the original was an overrated film, and yes, that pertains to every cut of the movie. It's a film I need to be in the right mood for, whereas 2049 is a visual spectacle I find myself wanting to rewatch far more often. Toy Story is a trilogy where I could honestly see a legit argument for any of the initial 3 movies being someone's favorite, though I think most people choose Toy Story 3 for their top spot, and I've just always thought Toy Story 2 was better. Maybe it's just because I was actually a kid when Toy Story 2 came out, but the sequel always had the most emotional weight for me personally. It's a story all about finding your place in life, and even though these are toys, the themes have always been extremely human, and I simply relate to Toy Story 2 the most. Jessie is also my favorite Toy Story character, so that definitely is a major plus for the film. Now, no offense to Temple of Doom, but the best Indiana Jones film does come down to Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade for me. And while I think both have classic moments and are great adventure films, the dynamic we get between Indy and his dad in The Last Crusade really solidifies it as my favorite. And the culminating moment of Indy reaching for the Holy Grail as his dad tells him to let it go is such a great endnote. And I just think it's a more satisfying finale than what we get in Raiders of the Lost Ark, as Dr. Jones largely wins by default in that movie. And there you have it, some sequels that I think surpass the original. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and please remember, this is just my opinion, so if you agree, disagree, or just have strong thoughts on anything I said, I'd love to hear you in the comments. Also, let me know what sequels you think surpass the original. Until next time, peace.